On today's video, we're going to explore the squalor that Florida is facing and how the inhumane conditions of Florida's homeless camps could aggravate a malaria outbreak. Personally, I'm not really impressed by the fact that a few cases of malaria exist in Florida. According to the CDC, the United States sees about 2,000 cases a year. That means that Florida, by percentage of the population, should have 120 cases every single year. Now, the fact that you have homeless camps where people are defecating in the woods and creeks full of needles, that in itself could definitely be a huge problem if a real outbreak of malaria or other disease were to take place. Because the squalor that you have in Florida is unlike anything else that you're going to find in the United States. Right now, the state of Florida should be allocating millions of dollars to address the situation per county. In the case that a real outbreak of malaria or other disease were to start up in Florida, the conditions in these homeless camps would aggravate the situation. However, the state of Florida has no interest in caring for the condition of its poorest people. The CDC warns that people in poor rural areas with lack of access to health care are the most at risk. For some reason that I don't understand, homeless people in Florida defecate in garbage bags and then hang them around their homeless camps. This attracts horseflies, mosquitoes, and other insects. They're the ones that spread malaria. Since malaria does not spread from person to person, malaria is spread from flies, mosquitoes, blood transfusions, and sharing contaminated needles, which we know is a huge problem in Florida's homeless camps. Florida's policies on squalor and homelessness is to implement measures that make it difficult and inaccessible to have any type of resource accessible to anybody who's poor or homeless. They want to aggravate the living conditions of people who are poor and homeless and deny them access to anything. They claim that this is going to deter homelessness, but if you look at the homeless rates, homeless population in Florida, it simply hasn't worked. But what it has done is that it's created some of the most inhumane living conditions possible, and these homeless camps are breeding grounds for mosquitoes. If a real malaria outbreak were to take place, these homeless camps are absolutely going to project the problem throughout the state of Florida. Already, we've noted in our series documenting homelessness in Florida that the vast majority of these homeless camps are going to have evidence that the people living in them are dealing with respiratory problems and other types of flu-like symptoms by the amount of medication that we find in these sites. And every single time that I've entered a homeless camp in Florida of large scale, I've dealt with fevers for the following 2 to 3 days. Recently, we noted that a health department in Lehigh Acres, Florida, actually had homeless people living in the shopping plaza who were defecating on the sidewalk in the front and behind the health department. Mosquitoes are the prime spreader of malaria. The propensity that these homeless camps have for people to leave containers and other household items outside where they're not supposed to be turns these homeless camps into breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And rather a malaria outbreak exists or not, these conditions do create detrimental conditions to the health not only of the people living in these homeless camps, but for the rest of us as well. When it comes to the spread of diseases, if we have people living in shanty towns and in squalor, that disease is going to eventually reach the rest of us in society. Ignoring the health concerns of the homeless will eventually catch up with us. We cannot keep ignoring the living conditions that are present in these homeless camps, because eventually the diseases that they are breeding in these homeless camps are going to affect the rest of us in society. This is a public health concern. However, the state of Florida cares more about its political affiliations and how their actions and spending are perceived by their voter base than they do about actually handling the problem. And the same thing can be said about saying that Florida has a malaria outbreak. I believe that for the most part, this is a political stunt to try to defame Florida and make it seem like there's something happening in Florida that is normal, that's been happening year after year. To be exact, it is not really that common For us to have a small malaria outbreak that is from within the United States, usually it's people traveling abroad that bring it. At this point, I would warn you, the audience, from being in fear, since I do believe that there's some type of political manipulation to sensationalize this story to get attention of people because of political things that are happening within the state of Florida. At this point, I really don't think this is a real concern. This is just the media, for the most part, trying to make Florida look like a bad place because of their political affiliation. The real problem in Florida isn't that there's a malaria outbreak. The real problem in Florida is if there really were to be a malaria outbreak, which is definitely possible, that the living conditions in these homeless camps would seriously aggravate the problem. And it's a miracle that with the proximity that Florida has to the Caribbean islands, countries like Cuba and Haiti, that we haven't had a malaria outbreak, considering that people are literally defecating on the streets outside of businesses in Florida. Living in mosquito infected homeless camps, as well as sharing infected needles. The condition of healthcare in Florida is an absolute crisis, yet the state doesn't want to allocate resources to people that need it, and absolutely nothing is going to be an incentive for the state of Florida to even remotely address the fact that these situations exist. For the most part, the state of Florida is just simply pretending like this problem is not happening. Mangrove swamps and other ecologically vulnerable areas from the Florida Keys all the way up into Southwest Florida are being destroyed by homeless camps. The amount of contamination in these homeless camps, as well as the potential for spreading disease, poses a real health concern to everybody living in Florida. And I'm not saying that's to sensationalize the story. In fact, I'm telling you, calm down and wait and see what happens, because I really feel like this is another one of those things that the media grabs, sensationalizes for views, but in reality isn't really a problem. But what I have been documenting in Florida that is a problem is the outbreak of homelessness and the horrendous living conditions that homeless people in Florida are being placed in. The real problem in Florida is these homeless camps, and none of the reporters that they've hired have the testicles to go inside of these homeless camps like I do and literally risk their lives going to places where not even law enforcement officers are willing to venture into. Most people in Florida move down here from other states, buy a house in a gated community surrounded by woodlands, and the last thing that the people buying these houses imagine that in those woods are people living like absolute savages. So the media is definitely going to spread that there's a malaria outbreak in Florida. But if you look at the analytics, this is about what happens in Florida every single year. It's just a very advantageous topic for them to tackle right now because of the political changes happening in Florida. Or because their behind-the-desk reporters can't come up with any real stories. Currently in Bradenton, Florida, where I live, a single mobile home park has had 3 homicides in a 1-month period, and the local news, for some reason, didn't cover that. You're going to tell me that that isn't a newsworthy article? No, it isn't. Not to them. But saying that Manatee and Sarasota County now have a malaria outbreak? Oh, definitely newsworthy, because they can write that story from behind their desk. In countries like Haiti and Cuba, malaria outbreaks are completely normal. Honestly, I've been to homeless camps in Cuba. In Camagüey, Cuba, my hometown, there's a homeless camp or a makeshift housing arrangement right outside of a landfill on the north side of the city. My family lives near there. It looks very similar to what we have here in this homeless camp in Polk County, Florida. It's about the same situation. That is where malaria outbreaks take place in Cuba. So if now in the United States you have homeless camps that look like third world shanty towns, and the living conditions there are actually worse, being that at least here people are taking heavy opioids and fentanyl. At least in Cuba, in the homeless camps, people are just drinking moonshine. That right there creates a situation where eventually you are going to have a serious freaking malaria outbreak in these homeless camps. You want a real problem in Florida? Over 8,000 people in Florida died in 2021 from overdoses, and over 100,000 people were administered to the hospitals from drug poisoning. That's roughly 1 in 200 people in the state of Florida ended up needing medical attention because of an overdose. In most Florida counties, for every death, there's about 10 drug-related arrests. that should just highlight to you how ineffective law enforcement has been in combating drug addiction and its sale and distribution. But instead of accepting responsibility for the crisis in Florida, most spokespersons for law enforcement in Florida are doing one of two things: saying California is worst, or blaming the crisis at the border, ignoring the fact that the real crisis is happening on the streets of the counties that they manage. For things to improve in the state of Florida, you have to at least admit that a problem exists and start taking measures to resolve it. But if you're denying that these problems exist and even denying resources to fix the problem, even the states that are allocating resources to resolve these issues are having very little success. So imagine if a state simply just starts to ignore the problem, how bad it could get. On our channel, we don't just repeat what we hear on Fox News or CNN. I actually went to Skid Row in Los Angeles, I walked the homeless camps of Fresno, and I walked the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And to be fair with you guys, none of the things that I saw in California even remotely come as close to the squalor and griminess that we see in the homeless camps in Florida. I just simply wasn't impressed. I actually thought that Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Denver, Colorado were much more shocking than California, but for some reason that doesn't make good headlines. We recently did a video in Lee County, Florida, showing you how people are dumping dump truck tires everywhere. So the sheriff's office makes a Facebook post showing that they have inmates cleaning it up. We did a video showing elderly disabled people suffocating on the streets of Fort Myers. Then they make a post saying that they're giving ice cream to the elderly people. Are you starting to see how this is a game for them? Instead of showing people what's really happening in these communities, they go and make a Facebook post that is the complete opposite of what's actually happening, and the people swallow that up and believe it. You see how this is a game for these people? They're not addressing the problem. They're just making a social media post showing a completely fake narrative of them doing what they're supposed to be doing, but in reality, they're not fixing the problem because they care about the people that are suffocating and elderly. They're doing it because now, oh crap, we have to address this. They're not cleaning up the dump truck tires because they're there. They're cleaning it up because I made a video showing it. Yet, quite possibly one of the most horrifying things I've seen in Florida is what's going on in the Florida Keys, where boats are abandoned, homeless people move in, they're trashing national wildlife reserves. These places are supposed to be pristine natural areas. The fish are dead. They're throwing dump truck tires, they're throwing propane tanks, gallons of paint and chemicals into the freaking Florida Keys. How does this not make national news? How does this destruction of the Florida Keys not make national headlines? What's different about this so-called malaria outbreak is that instead of it being from people traveling abroad, it's actually from within the counties in Florida. According to the news, most of these cases are happening in the Sarasota area. What I've noted in the Sarasota area is that we have a lot of tourists from Asia and from Africa, and that is the region of the world where malaria is most prevalent. Am I saying we shouldn't allow tourists from Asia and Africa to come here? Absolutely not. But it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to start screening these people when they travel into the United States, and that perhaps could be part of the problem. That's the only real difference that I can see between Sarasota County and other counties, is that for some reason that I don't understand, there really is a lot of international tourism in Sarasota. We've talked about this on my channel a few times already, specifically on my beach videos, where I meet people from Laos, Cambodia, Uganda, Angola, and this is kind of a really weird thing because you don't see tourists from all those places in other Florida beaches. It is true that they've kind of published a lot of articles saying that Sarasota is one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, or the best beaches in the United States, to attract tourism from the United States. But what they don't understand is that a lot of times those tourists are actually coming from around the entire globe. Somebody is watching these news articles in Laos or Thailand. They're like, hey, look, this is the best beach in America. Let's go and see it. That's really the best explanation that I can come up with, is that for some reason we're getting a lot of international tourism here in Sarasota, and it doesn't spread from person to person. It has to be like a carrier of a mosquito bite or something. It's not like it's a person who transmits it. It's a mosquito or a blood transfusion or something of the like sharing a needle. So, well, if we see 300 or 400 malaria cases in Florida, then we could say we have something that's significant. And again, the underlying problem that you have here is that you now have living conditions in Florida that are on par with places like Cuba, Haiti, or an African country. So when you have shanty towns and people living in squalor, you're going to get outbreaks of disease. Why in the United States of America on the year 2023 we're having this problem, I have no freaking idea. But if you have squalor, you have shanty towns, you bet you're going to have outbreaks of diseases. That's what happens throughout the entire world. Are we going back into the Great Depression because that's the last time that the United States had a lot of shanty towns popping up? We could be entering a stage in the American history where now people are starting to live in shanty towns again, and that will definitely be a great source of diseases. Alright guys, make sure you are actually subscribed to our channel with notifications so I can keep you guys up to date on what's really happening in the world, not on what CNN or Fox News wants you to believe is happening in the world.
Hey Jose, I'm Fletcher.
Fletcher?
Yeah.
And what's your name?
Dan.
Alright, cool. So
I hear you calling.
where we at, guys? Tell me.
We're in Naples, Florida.
East Naples.
East Naples, Florida. We're right out here in the McDonald's Gulf Gate Shopping Plaza parking lot.
Bayshore. It's hot at night.
I can't even sleep in my tent.
Yeah, it's hard.
And I got a little USB fan that I can blow right on me. I still can't sleep.
Yeah, and you used to be able to shower at the gyms, but they closed them down, right?
Yeah.
So now you can't even shower. I mean, that's gotta be tough for people out here.
It's hard, man.
You can't even shower anymore. You used to be able to shower at the gym, right? There's there one here?
Yeah, there's a gym right there, Planet Fitness.
Did they open up again?
They open back up, but they ain't gonna let you go in and shower. And then St. Matthew's house ain't gonna let you go over there and shower. The homeless shelter,
Yeah.
they won't let you go over there and shower because they're remodeling.